everyone to today's session. We're excited to introduce you to the MPN Progression Registry. This is a key initiative of the MPN Research Foundation designed to better understand how MPNs progress over time and to ensure the patient voice is central in shaping that research. Today, we'll share why this registry matters, how it works, and how you can get involved. We want to take a minute to thank our sponsors who make this program possible. Their support allows us to offer high-quality educational opportunities to bring together experts, patients, and caregivers to advance MPN research. Along with our MPN Pathways sponsors, we're grateful to our initial sponsors of the MPN Progression Registry, which is Sobi, Karyopharm, and GSK. Their early investment ensures that we can build a strong foundation for this long-term, patient-centered research initiative. Here's the agenda for today. We're going to start with a welcome and then move into the unmet need in MPN progression research, followed by an introduction to the MPN Progression Registry. We will also walk through a step-by-step enrollment tutorial and close with some time for Q&A and a call to action. So you'll hear from our leadership team, some scientific experts, and patient representatives. Each bring a unique perspective. Our CEO, Kapila Vaijas, will begin by framing the unmet needs in MPN progression research. Kapila has been instrumental in leading the foundation's strategy and ensuring patient needs are at the forefront of our work. And we also are lucky to have Dr. Rajit Rampal, our principal investigator and medical advisor for the foundation, who will share insights from his clinical and research expertise based at Memorial Sloan Kettering. He has been a leader in understanding MPN progression and shaping the registry's research agenda. And then next, you'll hear from our Chief Scientific Officer, Dr. David Schultz. David leads the scientific vision for the foundation and has played a crucial role in developing the design and the governance of the registry. And then we also have Dr. Tyler Parsons. He chairs our Patient Engagement Advisory Committee and is also an MPN researcher. So Tyler brings both a scientific and a patient-centered lens, ensuring that this work truly reflects the lived experience of the people in the MPN community. And then I also will be guiding through parts of the session today, particularly in the enrollment process. So as Director of Patient Engagement, my role is to ensure that patients and caregivers understand how to participate and feel supported every step of the way. Phil is also here with us from IQVIA. He has been instrumental in the development of the registry, and he's going to be here available for any Q&A. So let's begin with our objectives, and we'll talk about why understanding disease progression is so critical. We'll introduce the MPN Progression Registry and highlight its unique patient-centered design. We'll show how patients can safely and securely contribute data, walk step-by-step through the enrollment process, and finally answer your questions. Our ultimate goal is to inspire action and engagement in advancing MPN research. Okay, and with that, I'm going to have Kapila and Dr. Rampal turn their cameras on, and we'll walk through this discussion of the unmet need in MPN progression research.
Thank you for that, Sarah. What a great introduction, and thank you for everybody joining us today. And in particular, Dr. Rampal, thank you for always being here with us as we're talking about progression. And so I really want to open, Dr. Rampal, with a thank you. You know, as a practicing clinician, a doctor at Memorial Sloan Kettering who treats MPN patients, you have a really unique practice that you approach with compassion and a true sense of the best interest of your patients and their families. Yet you do that from a position that is really grounded in the science and the evidence. And then you also wear another hat as with a leading research lab that is recognized worldwide with a talented team. And you spend your time with that lab team linking the benchtop science, the biology, the data science to bring all these new ideas and innovations and ways of attacking MPNs into the clinic for all the patients. And so you bring that to MPN Research Foundation as our medical advisor, principal investigator for the Progression Registry. So I just wanted to open with a thank you and gratitude for the tremendous impact you have on patients around the world. And the patients that you see are very fortunate to have you in their corner.
Yeah, that's so kind, and you know, it is a one is uniquely blessed if you can do meaningful work in your life, and this is truly meaningful work.
Well, we thank you for that. So let's get started on our discussion today. just around maybe defining progression a little bit and what counts as progression. And specifically, when your patients ask you about what they can expect or some of the worry that they might express, how do you talk about disease progression in the context of patient care?
This is a great question. I don't think there are many standardized definitions, right? There are certain things that are obvious when, somebody with PV progresses to myelofibrosis, or somebody with myelofibrosis progresses to, acute leukemia. Those are clear-cut definitions, but those aren't the only definitions. And, what we see in clinic, and I think what we have to do a good job of trying to sort of organize and define better, or we see things like people who are on therapy and now they're having their symptoms get worse, right? Even though their blood counts are stable. Is that progression? I think it is. I think it absolutely is. We see people who are perhaps doing well from a symptom perspective, but now they've suddenly become a little bit anemic, whereas they weren't before. Is that progression? How do you argue that it's not, right? So there are multiple layers of what I would feel comfortable calling progression. And again, I think outside of the sort of major progression events, we have to, define these other aspects of progression better and formalize that. But I think they are real progression events because at the end of the day, they affect how our patients are doing.
That's really helpful, and it's a great way to sort of ground the patient community in understanding some of the nuances a little bit better, because it is a gray area to some extent. And so I guess maybe bringing it a little bit into the science part of this, why is it that much of a gray area? What is it about MPNs inherently that make it a bit harder to define and even predict where patients might fall on a trajectory of progression?
Well, I think that there's a number of different answers to that, right? I mean, if we think about this on a maybe pragmatic perspective, patients come in and they have their blood counts checked, and hopefully the physicians talk to them or the healthcare providers talk to them about symptoms. And there may be subtle things that happen, but are those things that are sort of carefully tracked over time? The answer is not always, because, for many people and for many people's disease, things progress very slowly, and they're very subtle. To me, one example of this is sometimes when the spleen gets bigger, it happens over a very gradual period. People become accustomed to it. And if one is not careful about checking the spleen size, in a repeated manner, you might miss that. And so one of the gaps here, I think, is that, we aren't maybe perhaps good at capturing all of the data that we need to alarm us, right? If we aren't, for taking the spleen example is to a little bit further extent, if we aren't really serially checking the spleen by ultrasound or doing a thorough exam, we could miss that, right? If we aren't taking a careful history from a patient and talking to them about symptoms, we could miss the subtle changes that are occurring. So I think that because in many cases things occur slowly, they often escape detection because they aren't necessarily being rigorously followed. And that's nobody's fault, but it's more about how do we kind of make the system of taking care of patients better so that we are following and looking for these more subtle signs and hints of things.
Right. Yeah, it sounds like, what we hear at the foundation quite often from patients is that their journeys are all very different. And it also sounds like in the care setting, when physicians and doctors are even thinking about how they're treating them, there's a little bit of differentiation and variability there as well that we need to be thinking about, that does make this a little bit more challenging. You mentioned a couple things there in terms of how maybe spleen size is measured, or other ways in which you and your colleagues might be monitoring in the clinic. Can you talk a little bit more about where diagnostics and other testing comes into play, into better understanding this? Or is there something around, just understanding symptoms better that might help us answer a few more questions about a progression trajectory?
Yeah, I think, that this is maybe the right phrase to answer the question is the right tools for the right job, right? Which works in many settings. But here the issue is, are we capturing the right data, right? So, if we think about the things we would want to monitor, obviously blood work. Most patients get blood work repeatedly. The question there is somebody looking at the general patterns and saying, hey, look, something has changed over time, right? Or do we sort of dismiss variations? And that could be something we can look at more carefully. Genetics are another thing. Genetics have changed this field fundamentally. And we know that from a diagnostic perspective, you have to do genetics to make the diagnosis. But what we've also known for many years is that a patient's genetics can change over time. Now, that is a bit of a Pandora's box, because does that mean we should measure that in everybody as a standard of care? Maybe, but the problem is, what will we do with that information? We don't know what to do with that information. And it's not accessible to everybody because in some cases, insurance doesn't cover the cost of the test. But, in thinking about the whole program here with the progression registry, right? If we were able to actually look at the data that exists and say, well, you know what, and people who've had genetics tested a couple of times, it actually turns out that it does matter, that if we see a change, it correlates with the progression. So a lot of this, I think, and I think part of why the registry is so important is it's about tying strings together, things that kind of are present in many people's medical records, and trying to find out, is there a pattern here? And do we need to pay more attention to a particular pattern as a warning sign of progression, right? I think that's the power of trying to put large amounts of data together, whereas, coming back to the practical part of this, right? When physicians in the community who don't see a lot of MPN, they see a couple of patients, and their view of the disease and how to treat it is informed by their experience. This is a normal, human reaction to anything. But the problem is, if you don't see a lot of it, or you don't have large amounts of data, you can't draw big conclusions. And that is, I think, part of the challenge, but that's the challenge that I think this registry is aimed to overcome.
It's interesting. You have really laid the groundwork for the critical importance for collecting data, collecting it consistently, collecting it over long periods of time. And so, as we go into the introduction of what the MPN Progression Registry is going to be doing, we're probably going to be introducing a term that might be new to some folks, called real world data or real world evidence. Can you give this audience a bit of an overview of what do we mean by that, with real world evidence and real world data, in the context of some of the data elements that you just described?
Yeah. So an example would be this. Let's go back to this concept we just talked about genetics. So if we were to do a what we would call a prospective study, we would say, all right, we're going to consent patients, we're going to take their blood every year, and we're going to do genetic sequencing and see what happens over 3 years. And that's a great thing to do. That's important types of research. But the thing is, there is a rich amount of data that already exists that doesn't require us to do new tests. It requires that we put the data together. And so the key things, that one can look at very easily is things like blood counts over time, right? Does that tell us something about progression? Does that give us early clues about it? Data with regards to patients' symptoms. Data, if it exists, with regards to studies, not studies, but imaging of patients' spleens, for example, right? A lot of this data already exists in the medical record. And again, if we can pull that data together from a very large number of patients, we will find patterns. And those are the patterns that will give us the clues as to how we, number one, define progression, but number two, how we look out for early signs of it, right? So it utilizes what exists, but in large amounts.
That's very helpful. Thank you. It kind of lays out what it is that we're trying to achieve here, what some of the needs are around data collection and the variability that we're seeing that is going to sort of will gain more clarity by bringing those data sets together as you're talking about. And so I think, you know, there's a lot of promise, there's a lot of opportunity. I think you've outlined even some of the challenges there. So as we close this off and transition into learning a little bit more specifically about what the MPN Progression Registry, what are a few things that you're very excited about for the potential of this registry as we kick it off?
Nobody has ever done this in MPN. Are there examples from other cancers? Yes. And has it been fruitful? Yes. And so this is a huge endeavor, right? And you know, full credit to the MPN Research Foundation for having the vision to carry this out, but also to having the fortitude to carrying out and being bold, because you know we need answers to these questions. Our patients need answers to these questions, and it is really up to us to try to find a way forward. And are there going to be challenges with the registry? There's no question about it. But what's the upside? The upside is absolutely tremendous, meaning that, you know, if we really are successful in putting all of this data together, we are going to find things. We are going to find hints. Maybe we find some answers in the short term, right? Not 10 years from now, but maybe we find answers in the next couple of years that say to us, okay, these are warning signs, and now we've got to validate that, but maybe we identify things early on. I think we have real potential to do that. I firmly believe that, you know, this project really has the potential to make a major change in how we treat and how we think about MPNs, and ultimately, and hopefully, how patients do.
That's a great way to end our conversation and lead into a little more specific introduction to the registry. So Dr. Rampal, thank you again for being on this journey with us for as long as you have. We're also very excited to see what comes next. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to David Schultz, our Chief Scientific Officer. Thank you, Dr. Rampal.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Rampal and Kapila, both for a great discussion and also for your leadership on this. We had a meeting earlier this week at which we were talking about the fact that this progression registry is really the fruit of an idea whose seed was planted more than 5 years ago. And it's remarkable to think about where we are, but I also want to acknowledge all of the work that's been done to get us to this point on the part of researchers and MPN Research Foundation staff, patients and caregivers, and our partners from the biopharmaceutical industry as well. And speaking of partners, I'm very, very pleased to be joined today for this presentation introducing the MPN Progression Registry by a friend and colleague, Tyler Parsons. I'm going to talk about the first half of the information that we wanted to share with you, and then Tyler, who, as you heard during the introduction, is a PB patient, but is also an MPN researcher, is also on multiple governance committees for the MPN Progression Registry, including serving as chair of the Patient Engagement Advisory Committee. We're very, very fortunate to have Tyler involved, and I'm very fortunate to have Tyler as a friend and colleague. And with that, why don't we go ahead and go to the next slide if we could. So today, one of the things that we're talking about is this MPN Progression Registry. So what is this? What are we talking about? Why are we so excited about it? The MPN Progression Registry is a long-term real-world registry focused on MPN disease progression. And Dr. Rampal and Kapila were talking a little bit about the value of real-world evidence just a moment ago. So this registry is a patient-focused research initiative that collects comprehensive long-term MPN patient health data over 5, 10, and maybe even more than 10 years. The goal is to help provide a better understanding of MPNs, why they can progress in severity, whether from one disease to another, and more rarely to diseases like secondary acute myeloid leukemia or AML. If one is a patient who lives in the US, who's ever been diagnosed with an MPN, that could include people like Tyler. It could also include people like myself. I am a ET patient myself, we can join and share the MPN patient experience over time. Participation is designed to be easy, private, secure, and require a minimal time commitment. If we could go to the next slide. So as we've been talking about, this is a clinical research study. It's focused on MPNs and disease progression. It's not a clinical trial. There's no intervention that's going to be a part of this study. Rather, this is an observational study for which Dr. Rampal is the principal investigator, and he's joined with two excellent co-principal investigators, Drs. Jan Buersdorf and Doug Tremblay. And participating patients will be helping these researchers and those of us at the MPN Research Foundation and other clinicians and the entire MPN community, which includes patients, caregivers, researchers, healthcare providers, our colleagues in the biopharmaceutical industry, and multiple other patient advocacy organizations to better understand the causes, signs, and timing of MPN disease progression, to discover new treatments and care strategies, to measure the effectiveness of currently available treatments, and ultimately, as always, with our efforts to move us closer to a cure for MPNs. Next slide, please. I want to step back and say that this is a very ambitious research effort that has a number of long-term and almost audacious research goals. Really, as Dr. Rampal was saying, it's a very unique initiative. It's a very timely and important initiative. And one of the things that we know is a bedrock of any effort such as this is the importance of keeping patient data anonymous and secure. So in the course of this study, no patient identifying information will be used for research. Only anonymous data without names or personal details will be shared with a carefully vetted and approved set of research teams. These research teams may be at academic centers, they may be research teams at the MPN Research Foundation, or they may actually, in a select number of cases, be research teams who are actually at pharmaceutical companies working on new therapies for MPNs. Because we're so focused on patient data anonymity and security, our registry will securely store and protect any health information that's shared from the electronic medical record or through patient-reported outcome surveys. It will meet strict HIPAA medical privacy laws. It will meet National Institutes of Health or NIH standards for privacy and confidentiality. This study will be reviewed each year and actually on an ongoing basis by an independent ethics review board or institutional review board, IRB, to ensure patient rights and safety. We actually selected one of the largest and oldest commercial institutional review boards in the United States, specifically because of their sterling reputation in ensuring patient rights and safety are protected. And as part of the registry, we will be keeping personal information separate from your health data. Next slide, please. By virtue of combining the electronic medical record, or EMR, and patient-reported outcomes, or PROs as we call them, we will be able to securely but seamlessly bring together data that reflect the regular care that people are receiving at sites, whether that's an academic site like Memorial Sloan Kettering Cancer Center, where Dr. Rampal practices, or whether that's more of a community site like where I receive my care for MPNs currently. Whether or not it's a community site, a specialist site, an academic site, as long as those sites are using one of the electronic medical records that we're able to collect data from, a patient will be able to participate. Those EMR data will also be combined in the database with these patient-reported outcomes data that we're going to be collecting. And past data from the EMR will help to create a picture of the patient experience over time that then we can use to set a baseline that will be compared to the prospective or future-oriented data that we are collecting both through the EMR and through the patient-reported outcomes. The patient-reported outcomes, and a good example of what that might be, is the MPN 10 symptom assessment form that some people might be familiar with, are going to be collected directly from patients online at the time of enrollment, and then every 3 months. And I've recently been through these instruments myself just to see what the experience is like. And at enrollment, it will probably take patients about 15 to 20 minutes to do all of the patient-reported outcomes forms. And then every 3 months, we estimate that it'll be more on the order of 10 minutes. We're very sensitive to the amount of time that we're asking patients to take to participate. We know how busy everybody is, and we very much want for this to be a non-burdensome study participation experience. Next slide, please. One of the things that we're very excited about is that the data and the research that we will be able to undertake as part of the progression registry is going to actually evolve over time. So with the MPN Progression Registry, our focus is on MPN disease progression. And the research questions that we think we can answer are going to evolve over time. So in the first 1 to 2 years, our focus is really on understanding the first 1,500 patients or so that enroll, including diagnoses, demographics, what type of MPN do people have people actually progress from one type of MPN, say essential thrombocythemia, to another, like polycythemia vera. In later years, we aim for researchers to be able to focus on more complex and detailed data as part of our established and strategic roadmap. And we know that it's going to be in those later years where we're really going to see the traction in research as it relates to disease progression. Patients, clinicians, researchers, and industry observers are providing a robust governance for this research over time, and Tyler is actually going to talk more about that in the second half of our presentation. Next slide, please. So because we are actually focused on evolving both the data and the types of research that we're able to do over time, we're really thinking about the real world challenges and what types of questions we might be able to actually answer with these data that we're going to be collecting. And we think that some of those kinds of questions will include better defining what we mean by MPN disease progression, as Dr. Rampal talked about, even coming up with a precise definition that's useful for patients and clinicians and researchers can be quite challenging given the diversity of the MPN patient experience. But having defined or having come up with some definitions for MPN disease progression, we are then really interested in being able to identify risk factors for disease progression and better understanding a risk factor for disease progression from disease progression itself. We want to be able to enable clinical trial planning and high-quality research studies of different types focused on MPNs, whether that's on multiple types of MPNs or whether that may be on one subset, say myelofibrosis. We're very interested over time in being able to inform the development of new drugs and treatment strategies. And when we think about drug development, this could actually be informing and helping to enable quite early drug development, let's say even in the preclinical phase before a drug even enters the clinic and begins being administered to patients, or it could actually mean as part of a supportive strategy for drugs that are already in the clinic and are already being administered to patients in clinical trials. And then very importantly, we want to be able to use these data to guide improved decisions about clinical care for patients. We know that that is a pressing need and where there are a number of questions that clinicians, researchers, patients, and caregivers have about fairly near-term clinical treatment management questions that really might be able to be addressed from the registry. Next slide, please. Before I hand off to Tyler for the second part of our presentation together, I want to come back to the important topic of privacy. So privacy is built into the MPN Progression Registry. As we've been building the registry, as we're getting ready to launch the registry, this is something that we are thinking about, talking about, and working on each and every day at the foundation and with our partners. Patient privacy and data security are fundamental to our success. We know that it is very important to have a trusting relationship with patients who are going to enroll in the registry, and for people to feel very secure about sharing their sensitive and confidential medical and other personal information with us. So confidentiality and patient privacy are assured using a layered approach of compliance, technical controls, and governance. And we're going to talk more about governance when Tyler takes over here. But I just want to reiterate that the registry is fully compliant with what we call HIPAA, the Health Insurance Portability and Accountability Act, that it is approved by WCG, that's the name of the Institutional Review Board, and WCG is itself accredited by the Association for the Accreditation of Human Research Protection Programs. I personally have been working with WCG and their predecessor organization since 1997 and have a tremendous amount of faith in their processes, their people, and the quality of their review as it relates to protecting patients. And no identifying information will be used in research studies based on data coming from the registry. So with that, I want to turn it over to Tyler and thank Tyler for being here today to tell you more about the registry and specifically about our governance structures.
Thank you so much, David. I just want to spend a couple of minutes and walk through the way that the registry has been structured. I think there's been a lot of intention in the way that the different arms that you see on your screen branch out from the top from the foundation, and really getting key people involved and making sure that we can include the voices that need to be included and get feedback from people that will not just be using the registry for research purposes, but from the patient standpoint, ensuring that, as David mentioned, we try to make the registry as streamlined and as simple for patients as we can. So starting at the top, of course, the board of directors, followed by the registry core team. The registry core team, I'm sure many of you know or have met, or will see them speak later today. And they are in charge of the day-to-day management and final decision-making authority for the registry. And then moving down to the steering committee, they are really formed. I'm going to spend a little more time on the steering committee and the data access use and publications committee and the patient engagement advisory committee one by one. But just as a brief overview, the steering committee is in charge of the strategic and scientific oversight and guides the strategy and evolution of research. And the Data Access Use and Publications Committee, which you may see abbreviated as DAUP, they are in charge of reviewing the data access and publication requests. And I'll talk a little bit more on that when we get to the slide for the DAUP. But this is a group that is going to be reviewing whenever researchers or clinicians request data from the registry, just to ensure that the data is being used properly, responsibly, and ethically. And then lastly, the Patient Engagement Advisory Committee, the PEAC, as you might see it abbreviated, is one of the committees that I have the opportunity to be a part of and chair for the MPN Research Foundation. And I think it's been very incredible to see the deliberate intention that the MPN Research Foundation has put on including the patient voice in creating this registry. And they take the PEAC very seriously as they advise on recruitment, representation, patient-reported outcomes, and patient communications. And this includes, as I'll show on the slide for the PEAC, a real diverse group of patients, caregivers, clinicians, and the MPN Research Foundation Director of Patient Engagement, Sarah, who opened the evening for us, who of course has done an incredible job in getting patients to be involved in these committees and to ensure that we have a good group of patients that can provide feedback on getting the registry off the ground. Next slide, please. So starting with the Patient Engagement Advisory Committee, or the PEAC, this is the group that I have the absolute honor to be a part of, and the group that provides very critical feedback to the Research Foundation for getting things off the ground from a patient standpoint. It's comprised of patients and caregivers with diverse MPN diagnoses. You can see under everyone's name We have polycythemia vera, secondary and primary myelofibrosis, essential thrombocythemia, as well as a caregiver. And these individuals are spread out across the country. And I think one of the things that I enjoy most is every single person has a very, very different career. And it comes with a very diverse input. It comes with a very unique perspective on how being an MPN patient has affected our lives all differently, as we all have different careers. There's a physician in this group. There is someone who has been right on the edge of leading clinical trials and doing research. As I mentioned, there's a caregiver. There are people who are in this group who do marketing. I think it's a really interesting, diverse group of people who bring very unique perspectives, and I think very important to ensuring that patients from all different backgrounds and patients who have all very different day-to-day lives, but the unifying factor of having an MPN, and these are the types of patients that the Research Foundation really wants to get involved. And so by including all of these diverse inputs, we're able to really try to get ahead of some of the questions and try to work through some of the issues that patients might have while signing up for the registry by including a committee like this to get input in how we shape things. And in the yellow box, again, just the priorities, perspectives, and preferences of patients and caregivers have been essential in the planning, development, and launch of the MPN Progression Registry. I know that's on the slide, but it's really, really true. It's been very, very cool, nice, neat to see the patient perspective really drive the conversation for some of the other committees that I have the opportunity to be a part of. They're not dismissed. They're not looked at as less than. They truly have been a driving force in some of the decisions that the Research Foundation has made for launching the registry. Next slide, please. And one of those committees that has directly taken the patient input very seriously and has changed some of the way that we've done things. But importantly, I have the opportunity to, as the chair of the PEAC, bring the patient perspective to this steering committee, which is composed of leading experts in MPN research, clinical care, data science, and patient advocacy. And I'm able to bring some of those patient concerns or questions, things that maybe the patient saw and said, I don't think that would sit right with patients, or I think patients would have a question. And every single time that I've brought something from the PEAC meeting to the steering committee meeting, it's made the minutes, it's made the agenda, and it's been discussed and answered. And I think that is, again, just a huge testament to the intention of having patients be such an important role in getting this registry off the ground. Next slide, please. And the last committee that was part of that flow chart on that first slide was the Data Access, Use, and Publications Committee. This is really the central housing group that will provide expert guidance on registry data governance, external data access, and publication standards. As David mentioned before me, this isn't a clinical trial, but this is very much a database where clinically relevant data is going to be stored and will need accessed by a variety of researchers and clinicians who the role of the DAUP committee is to ensure that the requests that are submitted are granted only to researchers who will use the data in scientifically meaningful ways, in ethical ways, and of course, respecting the fact that this data was given freely by patients and that the data should be treated as responsibly as possible. So the DAUP committee reviews the complex external data requests and publication proposals and advises on compliance with data sharing and publication policies, and as I mentioned, ethical standards and privacy protections, which David spent some time talking about how we want to ensure that all the data that the patients did give is used as ethically and responsibly as possible, and that everything will be anonymous and kept as private as possible. And I think that's the last slide. Yeah. So the way that I just want to reiterate that the way that the registry has been set up has truly been patient forward, and that the patient voice has been taken extremely seriously, and there was truly deliberate intention put forward by the foundation to include patients every step of the way. And I think there's no better person to speak next talking about patients than Sarah, who is the Director of Patient Engagement and is really in charge of rallying all the troops and all of us patients to the different committees to ensure that our voices are heard.
Thank you, Tyler. And thank you, David. That was excellent overview of the Progression Registry. I know we're going to have tons of questions, so we'll leave all those for Q&A here in a minute, but we appreciate you going over all of that. So now let's go step by step through how to enroll in the registry. Our goal is really to make the process simple, clear, and supportive. We'll walk you through each of the stages so you'll know exactly kind of what to expect and what you will see. But to begin, patients will be able to access the registry by visiting our website at mpnresearchfoundation.org, and then click the button that takes you to the MPN Progression Registry landing page. From there, you'll be guided through the enrollment process. The link from the MPN Research Foundation website will take you here. This is the MPN Progression Registry landing page. You can also go directly to the page by entering mpnresearchfoundation.org/MPN Progression Registry. This is what the page looks like. You'll find a wealth of information here, including our FAQs, a video from Dr. Ron Paul that walks you through the informed consent process. This is also the page you'll use to return to your participant login once you've created an account. You will notice there are different entry forms highlighted here. One says sign up, one says enroll now, but both will take you to the right place. Save this page in your bookmarks or your favorites so it will be easy to access in the future. The first part of registration is the MPN Research Foundation intake form. So here you'll provide basic demographic information, things like your name, your date of birth, your contact details, and your MPN diagnosis. This form is separate from your medical records. Once it's submitted, you'll then be directed to the registry portal to continue your enrollment. Importantly, none of the information from this intake form is linked to your medical record data. It's simply used for our internal tracking and communication to make sure that you're informed about new registry developments along the way. So once you've submitted the MPN Research Foundation intake form, you'll be directed to the registry portal for the eligibility assessment. If the browser does cut out or does not load correctly, you lose internet, you will also receive an email directing you to the portal. So be sure to check your email. But this section helps confirm that you meet the eligibility criteria or the defined criteria to participate. It's important to emphasize that none of the questions in this section are linked back to you personally. The focus is on the information like your diagnosis, any relevant dates, and high-level details of your medical history. This ensures that we can include the right group of patients while still protecting your identity. For most individuals diagnosed with an MPN over 18 in the United States, eligibility will be confirmed at this step. If there are any questions or discrepancies, our team is always available to help troubleshoot and make sure nothing prevents you from joining unnecessarily. But think of this step as really a safeguard. It makes sure the registry is consistent, secure, and scientifically sound while being inclusive of the broader patient community. And then once you've completed the eligibility assessment, if you are eligible to participate, this will be the screen you'll see next. It's the start of your account creation process. So at this stage, you'll set up your login by using your email as your username and then creating a secure password. You will need to verify your email address. So after you've created this, make sure you check your email, hit the verify button, and then you will be able to kind of go and review and sign the consent form, which is a very important step. The consent ensures that you understand what participation involves, how your data will be used, and really the safeguards that are in place to protect your privacy. The account creation step is the formal confirmation that you've officially enrolled in the registry. So very exciting. From here, you'll be able to log back in anytime to complete those surveys, to view any updates, and stay connected to the registry. Really think of it as your personal portal into contributing to MPN research over the long term. So in some cases, after completing the eligibility assessment, you may see a message indicating that you're not eligible. This can happen for a few reasons, but often because of an error in how information was entered. If this happens, the first step is to click Change My Information. That will take you back to your responses so you can really double check for any typos or any incorrect entries. Something as simple as the wrong date can cause an eligibility flag. But if everything does look correct and you still see this message, don't worry. Please reach out to us at research@mpnrf.org, and our team will review the situation. We know that patients want to contribute, and we don't want any errors or misunderstandings to stand in the way. This step is really about making sure participants fit the criteria, not about excluding people unnecessarily. So we're really committed to working with you if you run into any issues. And then once your account has been created, you'll complete your registry profile. So this is where you're going to enter your personal information to finalize your enrollment in that really privacy protected environment. It is important to note that while you're providing identifying details here to establish your profile, these details will never be used in research. All research is de-identified, meaning your name, contact information, and any personal identifiers are stripped away before data is shared with the research teams. What researchers see is anonymous information only. Your profile is what also allows us to contact you with any updates about the registry through the portal, any upcoming surveys, or any new opportunities to contribute to research. But if you have any questions or concerns, again, reach out to us anytime at research@mpnrf.org or by phone, and that number is there and should be in the slides that we sent, but it's 773-977-7216. Think of this step as setting up your secure connection point with the registry. It really ensures you have an ongoing access while keeping your privacy fully protected. And then after your account profile is set up, you'll gain access to the user portal. This is your personal dashboard for the registry. So inside the portal, you'll find, you'll be able to see your progress, complete those patient-reported outcome surveys, manage your participation over time. We've really tried to design it to be straightforward and user-friendly, so you can log in at any time and know exactly where you are in the process. But one of the first activities you'll complete in the portal will be connecting your medical records. This allows us to securely gather information from your electronic health record with your permission to build a fuller picture of your MPN journey. This portal is also where you'll find updates from the registry team and information about any new activities or surveys. It's really meant to give you transparency and keep you connected. You'll always have a clear view of really what's being asked of you and what you've already completed. And then one of the first and most important steps I really want to point out is connecting your medical records. So we've designed, again, this process to hopefully be as simple as possible, but you'll start by entering the name of the hospital or the care facility where you currently receive your treatment for your MPN. From there, you'll be prompted to log into the Connect EMR platform while using the same login that you've already created for that hospital system, such as MyChart or a different patient portal. But we ask you to connect all of the organizations where you've ever received care for your diagnosis. Many patients have seen more than one provider over the years, and having that complete record is extremely valuable for research. The system allows you to link multiple facilities, so you don't just have to choose one. But with your permission, this process securely brings in both your historical and ongoing medical data. This helps researchers understand the full timeline of your care and how really your MPN has evolved over time. And most importantly, all data is de-identified before being used in research. And then another key part of participation in the registry is completing regular patient-reported outcomes, or we call them PRO surveys. These surveys gives us really insight into your day-to-day experience with MPNs, like your symptoms, your side effects, and most importantly, your quality of life. You'll complete your first PRO survey at enrollment, and then you'll be prompted to complete new surveys every 3 months. Each one takes a short amount of time, but together really provides an incredibly rich data set about how patients are living with MPNs over time. The surveys are completed right in your portal, so it's easy to log in, answer the questions, and submit. And I want to emphasize, after launch, we will always be making ongoing improvements. We really want to continuously improve the participant experience, so taking part in the registry remains clear, supportive, and meaningful as possible. So if you run into any snags, please let us know. We're happy to really walk you through those or figure out a solution. I think with that, we are ready for some open discussion and questions. I'd like to invite all of our panelists to come back on camera for this part of the presentation. And then, David, I will ask you if there's any questions we want to start with.
Thank you very much. I'm just actually going through the questions as we speak. And Kapila, I know that there was one question that came in from a participant about whether or not someone who is, in this case, 35 days post allo transplant, will the person who has had a stem cell transplant be able to participate in the registry? That's one of the questions that came up, and I think you wanted to answer that live.
I did, because I wanted to make sure that everybody here and overall we got this specific answer captured. The short answer is yes. Congratulations on successful post-transplant life. And we're really grateful to have you here with us and continuing to think about your treatment and your journey and giving back to the MPN community. The way this registry is set up is that if you have ever had an MPN diagnosis, so presumably prior to any transplant activity, there was at some point in your journey an MPN diagnosis of the eligible types. And so we do want to make sure that those of you that have undergone a transplant, absolutely your information is critical to the effort, and we welcome you and encourage you to participate as long as all of the other eligibility criteria are also met. So wanted to highlight that for the whole group tonight.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I also wanted to follow up. There's a question that's been asked about the security associated with the registry system. So the question is, what security walls are in place to ensure no outside characters can access personal information and that personal information is protected from any other entity outside of this research information? And Phil, I'd like to ask you to take that question if you don't mind.
Absolutely, thank you. And thank you all for inviting me to join you this evening and speak about this. We're really excited to be launching together. This is, of course, a topic that we address quite frequently in the work that we do here at IQVIA. While I can't go into the specific details, kind of for obvious reasons, I can kind of address our overall security posture and the approach that we take to make sure that security is at the core of everything that we do in these systems. We work with very sensitive data across the healthcare landscape day in and day out. So security for us really it's baked in everything that we do. It begins from even before somebody joins, right? So you have the standard background checks and all of that everybody, engages in with their own employers. But throughout everything that we do, whether it comes to the endpoints or our own personal workstations, whether it comes to the processes that we're following, our DevSecOps is kind of a term, so development security operations, the coding patterns that we use within our systems, the scans that we do internally, the way that we set up our networks, the way that we set up our deployment architecture, and like all the way through the system, the security of the data and the privacy of the data is our number one priority in making sure that we're protecting this information that's been entrusted to us. So while I can't, like I said, go into the specific details of every single thing that's in place, we are using industry-leading approaches and techniques, and the methodology goes all the way to the core of what we do.
Thank you very much, Phil. And I have to say, working with you and your team at IQVIA, we have certainly seen that level of rigor and a systematic approach to all elements of the registry, and that's been very heartening to me as I think about actually having my own sensitive medical information in the registry, and I have a lot of faith and confidence based on our experience working with you. So I have another question here around whether or not, and maybe Dr. Rampal, I can ask you this one. I think this is a general question perhaps about participating in clinical studies, including the MPN Progression Registry, which is if a patient has pre-existing conditions that are captured in the EMR and that are then included as part of the database, the question is there a threat to our existing insurance coverage on account of these pre-existing conditions? And I'm sure that this is probably a question that you get from your patients and maybe from patients who are participating in clinical trials at Memorial Sloan Kettering Cancer Center as well. And I'll ask you if you wouldn't mind taking that question.
Yeah, there shouldn't be any issue with regard to that, because again, we're using de-identified data. So none of the data that we use for analysis can have any direct link to an individual's identifiers, meaning a person's name or where they live or any of those types of things. So there's no way to kind of trace that back, and that is actually part of the requirements of how this type of research is done. So the answer to this should be no.
Great. And then Dr. Rampal, I'm going to come back to you with another question that just came in actually, which is the registry meant for patients, only those patients with a JAK2 gene mutation and no progression yet, or are other patients also meant to be included?
Everybody who has an MPN is included, and we want to be we want to cast a wide net and include as many patients as we can. And part of the reason is that we don't want to bias ourselves and only look at a select group of patients. We want to look at the widest swath of patients that we can.
Thank you very much. I'm sorry, I'm going to come back to you one more time, and then I promise to spread the wealth around a little bit. But Dr. Rampal, what health issues other than a diagnosed MPN would exclude a patient from the registry? And maybe you already answered this in some ways, but are there any health issues if a patient does have a diagnosed MPN that would exclude them from the registry?
No, I think the registry is real world data, and in the real world, so many of our MPN patients have other medical diagnoses, right? So absolutely not. That is not exclusionary.
One of the questions, and this is a long question, so I'm going to take a moment to read through it, and I think it really comes from someone who is clearly already thinking deeply about the use of the registry data. So I'm going to read through this very thoughtful question. I'm curious if the registry will collect details such as the methods used for molecular profiles. So for instance, if a variant allele frequency percentage is entered, or if there is a secondary plan to collect samples that would allow for evaluation of genomics or proteomics according to a standardized method. I can see that medical records are collected and accessed over time, but it may not always be clear exactly what diagnostic tests were used for each record and result. Maybe I'll ask you, Dr. Rampal, as you think about the electronic medical record that you use most frequently, to what extent are the particular methods that are used, whether it's looking at something like a VAF percentage or variant allele frequency or other methods? This is a really good question because we're going to be collecting data from multiple medical systems around the US. And I'm curious, do you think that we're actually going to have information on methods included as part of the EMR, or are we more likely just to get a numerical figure within a data field?
From experience from doing research like this from other places where we collect data across centers, one of the things is that when you do genetics, all the genetic assays are not the same, meaning that if we do one at MSK, it's not the same methodology per se as Genoptics or some other company can use. So can we use the data from different centers? The answer is yes, but we have to know the methodology. In most cases, when a test is reported in the EMR, it does actually define these are the genes that were sequenced. This is the coverage. Coverage means it essentially tells us how deep the sequencing is, and that's actually information that's important when we try to cross compare. And you can't directly always cross compare VAF, between different centers. What you can do is use it as sort of in a relative sense and ask some broad questions and say, well, if we looked at a group of patients with a VAF of 5 to 30% versus those with 50 to 80%, you could ask those types of questions, but you can't really get at the granularity of 3% in this assay versus 5% there, because the VAFs are actually are statistics, not absolute values. But that's a challenge of doing research using a broad array of non-standardized systems, but it is not a insurmountable challenge at all.
I assume that this comes back to some of their initial comments that you made about working with real world evidence, that there's both opportunities and challenges there.
Absolutely.
Phil, I want to come back to you with another question. The question is about how medical data are obtained from the hospital portal. So the question is, I understand the medical data are obtained from the hospital portal. How are permissions handled? For example, do I need to advise my care team and sign off on permissions, or is that handled through some sort of interagency agreement in the system?
Absolutely. And great question. I will try to not nerd out too much on this topic because I could easily for a very long time. But this is a really good analogy is if anybody here has ever used any kind of financial software to keep track of your spending data or your banking data or to help you file taxes or anything like that, it's actually the same underlying data transfer protocol. So what happens is all you need is access to your medical records through, these are typically called patient portals, but some different healthcare providers will kind of have different branded names for them. I know that my own personal healthcare provider, they don't call it My Chart, they call it something like My, and then their provider name. But in any event, you would obtain that login from your provider. That's the coordination that you need to do with your healthcare provider, is make sure that you have access to that patient portal and obtain a login. Once you have a login, the way that the exchange works is from within the registry system, just like you would do with financial software, you'll identify where your data lives right now, where it's stored. So you'll put in your provider's name, just like I might put in my bank. Our system will hand you off to, just like you would if you're doing sharing your banking data, you'll get handed off to the bank's website to log in and authorize a data exchange. Our system will do the same thing. We'll hand you off to your provider's patient portal for you to sign in and authorize a data transfer that way. It looks a lot like when your bank might say you have these accounts, which ones would you like to share data from? You can check off what you'd like, what parts of your medical record you're going to share with the registry, and submit that. Once you submit that, it'll actually bring you back to the registry and the data transfer will start happening under the hood in the background. Now, it can take some time. Medical records, the way that they're represented for a transfer here, are quite granular, and there's quite a lot of information to transfer, so it can take some time for the transfer to complete. But it's happening in the background, and once you return to the registry, you know that that's kicked off and running. And what you will find when it completes is when you're looking at that patient profile or that participant profile page that Sarah showed, there's a section in there where you can see where you've shared your medical records from.
The next question is actually one that I think a number of people are going to have, which is, I was diagnosed over 25 years ago. My doctor would handwrite his notes. Do you want me to list that medical information, even though it's ages ago and prior to the invention of computer portals? Phil, maybe I can ask you to take that one, and Kapila, you might also want to comment.
Yes. So in your specific situation, the likelihood that that's going to be available for transfer is actually quite low. If it is available, though, in your medical record with your current healthcare provider, if it's been scanned in, most likely it would have been scanned in and stored as an attachment. If it's available within that system, it can be transferred and shared with us. The reality is that a lot of health information management offices often kind of triage what information they scan in to the record. And so it's going to be a question of whether or not the relevant office at that time scanned it in, and that can happen for a number of reasons. That decision could be made through a number of reasons, but it's going to be whether or not your provider put it in the electronic record.
Kapila, do you want to add anything else on that as you've been really thinking about questions of are we, would we be in any case asking patients to scan data, into the system? You've been thinking about this for a number of years.
Yeah, we have, because it's not going to be an uncommon situation that we know of. I think, Phil, you answered it perfectly for where we are today, is that if it's in some digital form currently, it has been scanned in, we will likely be able to access it. That said, we don't right now have a mechanism built in today at launch that would allow us to take in paper records if you have them in your possession. But we are close at work with Phil and his team at IQVIA to figure out if at some point in the future we were able to build something like that in. We're looking towards it because we don't want that critical and valuable information that you've probably cared and protected to save for all these years. We don't want that to be lost. If there's a way we could use that to help us move forward. So stay tuned. There may be something in the future that allows that.
The next question is actually one that I think a number of people are going to have, which is, I was diagnosed over 25 years ago. My doctor would handwrite his notes. Do you want me to list that medical information, even though it's ages ago and prior to the invention of computer portals? Phil, maybe I can ask you to take that one, and Kapila, you might also want to comment.
Yes. So in your specific situation, the likelihood that that's going to be available for transfer is actually quite low. If it is available, though, in your medical record with your current healthcare provider, if it's been scanned in, most likely it would have been scanned in and stored as an attachment. If it's available within that system, it can be transferred and shared with us. The reality is that a lot of health information management offices often kind of triage what information they scan in to the record. And so it's going to be a question of whether or not the relevant office at that time scanned it in, and that can happen for a number of reasons. That decision could be made through a number of reasons, but it's going to be whether or not your provider put it in the electronic record.
Kapila, do you want to add anything else on that as you've been really thinking about questions of are we, would we be in any case asking patients to scan data, into the system? You've been thinking about this for a number of years.
Yeah, we have, because it's not going to be an uncommon situation that we know of. I think, Phil, you answered it perfectly for where we are today, is that if it's in some digital form currently, it has been scanned in, we will likely be able to access it. That said, we don't right now have a mechanism built in today at launch that would allow us to take in paper records if you have them in your possession. But we are close at work with Phil and his team at IQVIA to figure out if at some point in the future we were able to build something like that in. We're looking towards it because we don't want that critical and valuable information that you've probably cared and protected to save for all these years. We don't want that to be lost. If there's a way we could use that to help us move forward. So stay tuned. There may be something in the future that allows that.
And Kapil, I'm going to come right back to you. There's a handful of questions that I'm glad to see that are really asking generally about the engagement with patients who are in the registry. And Sarah, this is something you might want to comment on as well. And really the questions all point to curiosity about, will I be able to actually see trends in data in my own data that I might want to share with my healthcare team? And is there some sort of resource associated with the registry where I might have access to research updates for this project, other research efforts, trial results, things that might be relevant as a patient. So I think there's really two parts to the questions that have been coming in. And one is about, will I be able to use the registry to actually track my own laboratory results, patient-reported outcomes, and other medical information. And then the second is, will the registry have a mechanism by which patients will be able to, have more engagement and have access to resources, whether it's things we're learning from this registry or other research opportunities that might be available?
So I'll kick off the answer with two sort of higher level observations and then lend it off to others to fill in. So first and foremost, we are incredibly grateful to all of you in the patient and caregiver community who are interested in this and willing and able to share your information with us, because we know how valuable that is to you, how personal that is to you, but the incredible value that it brings. It's going to unlock answers, as Dr. Ron Paul had said earlier. It's really exciting where we're headed, and the more information we can get, the more answers we can unlock. That said, we know it takes something from you to do this, and so when we designed this registry, we thought long and hard about what are the things that we might be able to give back to you all as participants in taking the leap of faith with us to do this, as well as stay with us for years to come as we continue to refresh the data that we're looking for and continue to answer the patient-reported outcomes. And so that said, we have really been thinking a lot about dashboards and other ways in which we can reflect back your own some of your own medical information back to you. And so that has been gone through a lot of careful thought and is in design and development to be able to add into the registry. So the second piece of that as well is that this project has been designed with sort of a longer term roadmap in mind. And so as you start to participate now early and be an early adopter of it, over time, you'll also start to see additions and new features and new functionalities being able to be deployed through this platform. And these are the very types of things that we intend to keep designing, keep deploying with your input, with your feedback on how we can make it better for you all to engage and participate and see your data. And then the last piece I'll say about the distribution of maybe other research information or other research programs and projects. Once a participant is enrolled into this platform, we will have a private and secure mechanism to be able to communicate with you all. There will be one of the screenshots that Sarah shared shows an area where you may be able to actually see resources and tools that we'll be able to upload and share those with you. But we'll also be able to communicate with you about other studies that are coming up, clinical trials that are coming up, how this data and information is being used, and if we are getting ready to perhaps create a publication with our scientific colleagues. All of that will be communicated through this portal to those of you who are enrolled and active participants, and be able to see it in a variety of ways. So that hopefully answers some parts of it, but I'll certainly hand it off to Phil and or Sarah to answer other components of that.
Great. Sarah, Phil, I'll turn it over to you if you have anything that you would like to add.
No, I think Kapila, you did such a great job of answering that question. I know at the MPN Research Foundation, we're very committed to getting those results back to patients. If anything's published, I know, Tyler, you may want to comment on this as well. Until they're abstracts or, out there for the public, we have to keep some of that research private. But once that is published, we absolutely want to share with our participants to make sure that, they're learning from the science as well.
Thank you very much. We have a question about changes over time in a person's health status and how that may affect registry participation. So the question is, as a person's condition progresses, they may be less inclined to be entering data due to fatigue, illness, etc. If and when this occurs, can a person designate a proxy that might enter data on one's behalf? And I will just go ahead and answer that and say, yes, the registry is set up so that a legally authorized representative, or LAR, a proxy, can be designated to actually not just later at time, but actually even at initial enrollment can actually be the one to be entering information, answering patient-reported outcomes, connecting the electronic medical record, etc. So that can all be done by a individual's legally authorized representative. And if a person's status does change over time, so that when they enrolled, they found participation in the registry reasonable, but over time they needed to have a legally authorized representative take over that responsibility, then it's possible to update one's profile within the registry to account for that legally authorized representative. And I think that's a really great question, especially given that we are going to be following people over time and that we know, unfortunately, that people's health status does change, that at times disease does progress and it may become more challenging to actually participate because of some of the symptoms that were mentioned, such as fatigue. So a great question, and thank you very much for that one. See, we also have a question about whether or not we are able to enter additional records like spreadsheets. So a patient says, I have kept a spreadsheet of blood count readings since diagnosis. Would you want that spreadsheet? And Phil, maybe I'll just ask you to talk about this. I believe that in the current registry architecture, that's just not something that we're able to accommodate, but I'm sure that it comes up frequently when you're talking about patient registries.
Yeah, and I also I will point out that within kind of this community, I had the privilege of about a year ago listening to just listening into a discussion session within this community, specifically with the MPN Research Foundation. Possibly some of the people who were in that session might be here today. One of the things that I do want to share is just in my experience, I think that this community here is actually extremely engaged and motivated and doing a lot of kind of self-tracking, very sophisticated, versus a lot of the other areas that I've worked in previously. So it's actually a really unique question. It's a really interesting question, and it's a commendable question. And I do just want to say that we were really impressed. I think from the perspective of kind of self-tracking data, there's a couple of things that we're putting forward in this registry that I think will account for that. There's a couple of kind of key symptom measures and a couple of other key endpoints that are included in the launch of the registry for kind of self-tracking. You'll find it in the registry under an area called diaries. But it's really kind of a daily way of that you can use as often as you like, no obligation to use it daily, but you can use that to kind of track changes over time in key endpoints or key symptoms that I think are configured there. And that can expand over time. It can be useful for you for tracking. That data can also be used for analysis as well. It is sharing that data with the registry. And so some of your historical kind of tracker data, whether it's in a spreadsheet, whether it's in an app that you might have been using for tracker or for tracking purposes, or other things like that, you can share that data through that mechanism directly in the registry. I will note, if you already have it in a spreadsheet, it's not an import type of thing at this time. It would still be a kind of move it over manually. But there is a way to share that with the registry. And if it's not something that you're doing currently using a tracker, you're also welcome to adopt this as a tracker that you can use for some of those particular things that the registry is prompting for.
Thank you, Phil. I had actually, I don't think I would have remembered to mention the tracker that we have built into the registry. So thank you very much for highlighting that. A really interesting question, Phil, I want to come back to you is a question that reads, is there an AI component to the architecture of the registry? And, you know, we certainly are thinking about ways that we can employ machine learning, natural language processing, and other AI-related methods to try to make the most of the registry data, including data that are structured, that is to say that they're entered in specific fields, and data that are unstructured, more like physician notes and some other types of data that we might encounter. We're certainly thinking about how we can use AI-related methods for our for our analysis of the registry data. However, is there an AI component built into the registry system itself or not?
Probably not in the way that this question intends, but we are using AI already as part of delivering this registry system. I can draw this back to a couple of things. We did not have the AI design the architecture of the registry. We wanted to make sure that we're actually doing that ourselves. But we do use AI tools in a variety of ways. One of those, I can draw a connection back to our security approach, which is we use a multi-layered security approach. One of those layers includes AI-based tools that is automatically scanning for novel threats and informing us before that code even has a chance to get out in the wild. So that is one place that it's being used right now. Probably not the way that the question was expecting, but that's one thing that I can share about the way that it's being used today.
Wonderful, thank you.
Mhm.
Kapila, a question that I wanted to come back to you with was how frequently can participants anticipate updates from MPN Research Foundation on the registry? And then the other question is, what if I decide to no longer participate? What happens to my data at that point in time? So maybe I'll ask you to take on those two, and I don't know if Dr. Rampal or someone else would also like to add in.
So I'll start with the communication component of this, and building on that to say that our intention here is absolutely to provide you with those regular updates, not just about metrics of how many people do we have enrolled and some of the sort of high level information, but we want to make sure that you are clear on how the data is being used, the research publications, updates from the foundation, updates to the registry when we are adding features and updating components of it as well, that you're in the loop. So one, you will definitely see regular communications from us through the portal itself. And then our goal really is to provide quarterly updates to the whole community. That includes our steering committee, some of the other committees that Tyler had gone through, our close stakeholders, and of course, as participants of it, we want to make sure that at a minimum on a quarterly basis, you're getting some communication from us in terms of where we're headed, the progress we've made, and maybe some forward-looking information as to where we're going. So I do think between the portal communications, and again, you all are part of our MPN Research Foundation communications that you get often. So you hear from Sarah quite often through the MPN Pathways program and other initiatives that we have. So that will all continue. And so you might hear from us more often than not. So the short answer is yes, and we want to make sure that we're giving you as much information as we can to keep you informed and engaged. As for the data question, if you choose to step back, I'm going to hand that off, I think, to Phil to start, and then maybe Dr. Rampal as well.
So what we do as the custodians of the data, essentially, for the MPN Foundation is adhere to the data governance rules. We are scrupulous in ensuring that the data governance rules are known and followed. I am probably not the right person to speak to the protocol, but it is addressed in the study protocol, and we ensure that the study protocol rules are followed all the way through.
Dr. Rampal, would you like to talk more about this, or shall I?
Yeah, I mean, this is part of the way informed consent works, which is that we respect the principle of patient autonomy, meaning that at any point a patient can say, I don't want to participate in this research, no matter what kind of research it is.
All right. Sarah, we probably either have time for one more question or maybe for you to do a wrap up, and I defer to you in terms of where we are with respect to our time.
Yeah, we do have, I think, maybe 1 minute for one question. There was a really good one, I think, that Tyler, I'd like you to take, because we've worked really hard on this, getting awareness to the physicians. So the question was, I wonder if one of your goals is to help educate physicians. I've had some wonderful physicians and some that were a little out of touch care providers. How do you manage and understand physician practices who are not following or understanding these cancer practices with out-of-date protocols? So can you discuss kind of how we've got input from the PEAC and our steering committee on really how to get the word out to other providers?
Yeah, I think it speaks a little bit to what Phil was saying that was recognized with the MPN patient community, which is just how on top of their disease and tracking they are. And even within the PEAC, as well as some of the other patient committees that we have at the MPN Research Foundation, this comes up quite a bit. And I think one of the initiatives that the PEAC has with, of course, within the MPN Research Foundation is as data becomes available through the registry over time and trends start to be published and trends start to be acted on in in ways from either pharmaceutical companies or academic centers where longitudinal data has been tracked and presented and published, that will be available for patients to bring as dialogue with their patients or with their physicians. We have routes that we plan on doing that, and I think that's a really, really important step that the Research Foundation has taken seriously, and a lot of patients have brought up. So we're definitely addressing that.
Tyler. Excellent. Okay. I know there may be a few more questions we haven't answered, but we will absolutely get back to all of you. We appreciate your time. I'm going to wrap it up here with a couple more slides. Thank you to our panelists. But so as we wrap up, I want to really thank you all for joining us today and for your engagement throughout the session. I think we had over 60 questions, so that's incredible. But our call to action is really simple, but powerful. If you're a patient living with an MPN in the US, we encourage you to enroll in this registry. By participating, you're helping to answer really critical questions about disease progression, supporting future clinical trials, and really shaping the development of better treatment. So if you're a caregiver, if you're an advocate or a community leader, we ask you to help us spread the word, share the registry with others in your networks who may be eligible. If you have any questions in the meantime, please reach out. You can reach out to patient engagement at mpnrf.org or research@mpnf.org. So have a wonderful evening or morning wherever you are. We really appreciate your participation. Have a wonderful day. Thank you.